Do you see the Gemara now?
No,
Yes.
Still not?
still
Yes.
not
You see, I see
Anybody
it.
else sees it?
there.
Let me know when it shows up. It could be just a little slow. Could be the internet connection could be a little slow. So what we had until now is on Nun Ches Hamid Beis, we had a Mishnah. And the Mishnah discussed two scenarios when a husband is makdish the Ma'at Yadayim of his wife. The Reish of the Mishnah discusses someone being makdish the basic Ma'at Yadayim of his wife. And the Gemara already told us that it's speaking where he was not paying mezonos, and since he was not paying mezonos, he doesn't have a right to those Ma'at Yadayim, and therefore his being makdish them has no impact because they don't belong to him. Because if you don't give mezonos, you don't get Ma'at Yadayim. Period. The second half of the Mishnah discusses not her basic Ma'at Yadayim, but it discusses the Ma'at Yadayim that she earns over and above what is typical. And the Gemara today is going to discuss what is typical, but if over and above what's typical, that he gets connected the more of discretionary spending money that he has to give his wife once a week. And Rashi taught us that there's a difference between the link between him giving her the discretionary spending and him receiving her extra Ma'at Yadayim than mezonos. If he doesn't give her mezonos, he gets zero Ma'at Yadayim. There's nothing. He has no right to whatsoever. But the extra Ma'at Yadayim, if she works extra and she makes more than what's typical, that he has a right to, even if he's not giving her the all, even though he's not doing his fair share. But how does it work? The way it works is she has the right to hold on to her extra Ma'at Yadayim as collateral until she gets her mal. So even though technically it's still his, but it's leaned for her to hold on to until she can collect the mal per week that she's entitled to. So therefore, when a husband makes that extra Ma'at Yadayim hektish, it's his, and he's able to make it hektish. The problem is the hektish can't be chal now because she has a lien on that money because he hasn't yet paid her out the ma per week. But when she dies, then he arshins all of those claims. So at that point, the Gemara tells us that Rav and Shmuel said at that point, once she dies, the Ma'at Yadayim, those extra Ma'at Yadayim, will in fact become hektish. However, that was the svar of Rav and Shmuel. But Rav Ada bar Abba said that they will become hektish right away. And the reason why they will become hektish right away is because they learn that it's not the ma kosef that entitles the husband to her extra Ma'at Yadayim. It's actually the mezonos that entitle the husband to the Ma'at Yadayim. And they learned that the case of our Mishnah is speaking where the husband was giving the mezonos, he just wasn't giving the ma kosef. So therefore, they learned that the mezonos is paying in full for her extra Ma'at Yadayim, which means he's entitled to those Ma'at Yadayim immediately live. And therefore, they will become kodesh right away. Rav and Shmuel learned that the ma is connected the extra, and since he didn't give the ma yet, the hektish that he makes for Ma'at Yadayim will only take effect after she dies, and he reclaims the lien. That was the shita of the, I believe, of Reb Meir in the Mishnah. And in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says, regardless, it's not Kaddish at all. And we're soon going to learn the reason for that is because how could he be makdish something today if it won't become his until she dies? It's called the dover shaloi bala olam. So Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says that a person cannot be makdish a dover shaloi bala olam. Reb Meir holds, as we learned yesterday, that a person can be makdish a dover shaloi bala olam. So just to review this machlokes that we had between Rav and Shmuel and Rav Ada bar Abba. Rav and Shmuel held that the reason why the husband gets her regular Ma'at Yadayim is because he gives her mezainos. And the reason why the husband gets her extra ma'aseh yadayim, if she earns more than typical, is because of the more of discretionary spending that he gives her. While Rav Ada bar Abba said it's exactly the opposite. For in exchange for giving her mezainos, he gets her extra income, and in exchange for the more kosef, he gets her basic ma'aseh yadayim. So now the Gemara is going to challenge both Rav and Shmuel, as well as Rav Ada bar Abba. So we're going to bring rayas that the more kosef is for the extra cash, and we're going to bring rayas that the more kosef is for the basic income that she has. And in each case, we're going to have to deflect the raya either to protect Rav and Shmuel or to protect Rav Ada bar Abba. So let's start with the first question. Meisvei, tiknu mezainos takas ma'aseh yodel. That's pretty straight up. Mezainos is takas ma'aseh yodel, which is exactly what Rav and Shmuel said, but Rav Ada bar Abba said that the mezainos is takas her extra ma'aseh yodel. So how will Rav Ada bar Abba explain these words? Tiknu mezainos takas ma'aseh yodel. Amo, the way he'll read it is tiknu mezainos takas meiser ma'aseh yodel. That he gives her mezainos because he receives the extra income that she produces. Tashma, now we're going to ask a kasha on Rav and Shmuel. It says, if he doesn't give her the more ketzav l'tzarchel, which was for her discretionary spending, then ma'aseh yodel shalom, her ma'aseh yadayim are hers, which seems to be her basic ma'aseh yadayim. So this proves against Rav and Shmuel. In fact, that the more kosef is not for the extra ma'aseh yadayim, it's for the base ma'aseh yadayim. So how will Rav and Shmuel deflect this raya? Again, he'll say, Ema, Moiser, Ma'aseh Yodel Shalom. If he doesn't give her the Mal Kasef, it's the Moiser Ma'aseh Yodel that she gets to keep. Frak the Gemara, you cannot say that. Because V'halakha Tani, this same Brisa is describing what is it referring to with the Ma'aseh Yodayim. And the way the Brisa describes it, it's clear that it's referring to the base Ma'aseh Yodayim, not the extra Ma'aseh Yodayim. Why? Because Valakatani Mahi Oisoloi, what is considered the base Ma'aseh Yadayim? It's Mishkal Chomesh Shloim Shesi B'Yehuda. She has to spin Shesi, which is the thicker thread, the one's the warp one's the weft, I don't even remember which is which, but it's the thicker of the two threads, and she has to spin the weight of 5 Shloim. In Yehuda, the 5 Shloim had a certain weight to them, and whatever that weight, let's say it was a pound, just for argument's sake, you have to spin a pound of threads. So it's not a monetary value that she's assessed with. It's a certain amount of work. I guess in those days, women didn't trade stocks online and make millions of dollars in a shorter period of time. So her normal work that she would do would be to spin, and the amount of work that we expect from her as a typical workload would be the amount of time it takes to spin 5 shloim. So from the fact that the Brisa that's discussing Ma'aseh Yadayim describes this, clearly it's referring to her basic Ma'aseh Yadayim. Zok Gemara, no, not at all. It's actually explaining the extra Ma'aseh Yadayim. But how could I know what the extra Ma'aseh Yadayim is before I define what the basic Ma'aseh Yadayim are? So Hachigama, Ma'aseh Yodel Kama Hav. How much are the basic Ma'aseh Yadayim? Why do I need to know that? The Leda Moiser Dida Kama, in order that I can figure out what's considered over and above the standard Ma'aseh Yadayim. And that, the Brisa tells us, is Mishkal Chomesh Shloim Shetzi B'Yehuda, Shein Esher Shloim B'Galil. The Shloim, the coins in Galil, were 50% of the weight of the Shloim in Yehuda. So however much 5 Shloim weighed in Yehuda, 10 Shloim weighed that same amount in Galil. So it's a certain weight, whatever that weight is, she has to spin that amount of thread. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said, Halacha Rabbi Yochanan Hasan. So Rabbi Yochanan Hasan, there in our Mishnah states that even though Shmuel already taught us that Rabbi Meir, who says that when someone is makdish the moiser ma'aseh yadayim of his wife, it becomes kadosh after she dies, which means he's being makdish today something that's only going to be relevant in the future, which is a case of makdish davar shloi b'layla. That's how Rav and Shmuel explained Reb Meir. However, Shmuel paskins like Rabbi Yochanan in Asandra. Just because Shmuel explains Reb Meir's shita, it doesn't mean he holds like Reb Meir's shita. He's actually paskining like Rabbi Yochanan in Asandra, who holds that in this case it wouldn't be kaddish at all because ein adam makdish davar shaloi b'loila. Frek the Gemara, umi omar Shmuel hachi. Does Shmuel actually hold that ein adam makdish davar shaloi b'loila? I'm going to prove to you that he holds that a person can be makdish a davar shaloi b'loila. But now we learned, instead of the husband making things hektish, like we learned in our Mishnah, now it's the wife making things hektish. The wife says, I'm making an isser. Anything that I produce should be osir to you. Now, a koinem is like a neder, and it answers something. Now, it answers it just like hektish. So when she says, my ma'aseh to be osir to you, she's saying basically that my ma'aseh will have a din of hektish, but just for you. For everybody else, it's mutter. So it's a unique type of isser that it's only osir to the person who she targets. So if a woman said kodim shani oisalaficha, einay tzarich lahafer, the husband could totally ignore that neder. He doesn't even have to be made for the neder as is his right. Why can he totally ignore the neder? Rashi tells us, einay tzarich lahafer, neder zeh. You know why? She'ein ba koyach lakdisha. She never had the right to create any isser on her ma'aseh yadayim. Lefishi shalot, because it belongs to the husband. So we're speaking about a man who's paying his dues. He's paying his mizonos. He's paying his discretionary extra funding per week. So her ma'aseh yadayim belong fully to him. So if she tries to create an isser, it has zero impact because these are not hers to aser. That is the shita of the Tanna Kamma. Rabbi Kiva says we do need to be concerned. Yofer shema tadif alav Yosy min haroyal. If she produces a lot extra, Tosfos says this isn't the regular extra because the regular extra is his as well because he's also giving her the mu'akasa. But if she produces even more than what's regularly made more, so she's like not double time, triple overtime. She's producing that does belong to her. And that would be usher to him. So therefore, he should be made for her neder so that whatever she produces will be mutter to him. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Amar, and this is what we're going to focus on. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Amar, Yofer, he should be made for the neder because it could impact him. Now, it can't impact him now because, just like the Chachamim say, none of this belongs to her. The ma'aseh yadayim belongs to him. The moiser ma'aseh yadayim also belongs to him. So why should he be made for the neder if it's not relevant? Because of the future. Yofer shema yigar shena. If sometime in the future he divorces this woman, then the moment she's divorced, her isser will be chal. Because at that point, those are her own ma'aseh yadayim. And if he wants to marry her back, he won't be able to. Because now she has uttered any of her ma'aseh yadayim to him. And it's impossible to live with a woman who you can't have any benefit from, because it's virtually impossible to live with somebody and not have any slight benefit from them. So therefore, Yofer, he should be made for the neder, not because it's relevant to his current marriage, but Shema Yigar Shena, Usaheya through a laughter, and then he won't be able to take her back. So I guess if he was a kohen, this wouldn't be a concern, because anyway, he can't marry her again. But we're talking about a Yisrael who could remarry his wife, and of course, we would want him to remarry his wife. But if he allowed such a neder to take hold, it would eliminate chances of him being able to marry her again. Now, this is clearly a dover shaloi b'loila, because we're suggesting that the isser that she's making now will impact her ma'aseh yadayim sometime in the unknown future, if and when she gets divorced. I mean, there's no dover shaloi b'loila more than this, because we don't even know it's ever going to happen. And what did Shmuel say? V'amar Shmuel halachik Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. And Shmuel passes like this. So clearly, if Shmuel is passing like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, in this case, she's passing that a lady today can answer her ma'aseh yadayim sometime in the future after she gets divorced. That's a very big davar shaloi b'loila. And he's saying that she could answer it. Yet in our Mishnah, he passes like Rabbi Yochanan Sadler, who says that he cannot answer her Ma'aseh Yadayim that he's only going to get in the future when she dies. So it's a steer in Shmuel. In our Mishnah Paskins, Ein Adam Makdish Dover Shaloi B'Lo. And here with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he's saying a woman can make a koinim on a Dover Shaloi B'Lo. So we have a stira in Shmuel. Zok to Gemara, maybe we could answer this question. Ki Amar Shmuel halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. When Shmuel said that halacha like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who said he's agreeing with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri that the reason why he's suggesting that a husband should make a farah is for the same reason that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri quoted, because of some time in the future? No, maybe it's for right now. Maybe it's for hadafa. Maybe it's like similar to what Rabbi Kiva said. She should be made for another because right now she might be answering her hadafa. Frankly, that makes no sense at all, because even if it's, first of all, Rashi asks right off the bat, even if it's for hadafa, it's also hadafa shaloi b'loidom. It's money she had not yet earned. But more than that, v'leima halachik Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri lahadafa. So then what he should have said was not halachik Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because that's highly misleading. That makes it sound like he's agreeing completely with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and he's saying that you could answer a davar shaloi b'loidom, when in fact that's not what he meant. So it should have specified the halachik Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri only because of the hadafa. Inami, or another way Shmuel could have expressed his understanding, was he could have said, Ein halacha k'Tanakama. The Tanakama who says the husband should totally ignore the nether, I disagree. I believe that the husband should not ignore the nether. Rather, he should be made for it, because otherwise it's going to impact Adab. Inami, or you know what else Shmuel could have said? Halacha k'Rabbi Akiva, because that's precisely what we want to say is Pshat and Shmuel. So it doesn't make sense, our attempt at a teretz, and therefore we're still stuck here in this brayso. Shmuel passes like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri that this woman could answer her davar b'loy b'loydom, her wages of the future. Yet in our Mishnah, Shmuel passes like Rabbi Yochanan Sadler, who said that a man cannot be maktish the wages of his wife in the future. So Zok the Gemara, we have another teretz. So Amar Rabbi Yosef suggested another teretz. Let's understand the Mishnah that we talked about, where Shmuel Paskin like Rabbi Yochanan Sadler is speaking about hektish. That someone said this should be hektish. The case that we're discussing here is not hektish. She's not being maktish her wages. She's just making it utter to her husband, but she's not making it hektish. So there's a very big difference between kainamais and hektish. Shiny kainamais, that there's a chiddush. Kainamais will work even on a davar shaloi b'lo'olam. You know why? Because kainamais is a very big chiddush. It can do things that a normal hakish would never be able to do. For instance, mitoich the adam oiser peiros chaveri alav. Through a kainim, I can say that your peiros should be usher on me. How could I put an isser onto your peiros? They're not mine. I have zero rights or control to your peiros. Yet the chiddush of kainim is that I can actually create an isser on your peiros relevant to me. That's a huge chiddush. So because kainamais don't play by the normal rules of the hektish game, therefore we can stretch it and say as well that adam maktish davar shaloi b'loy. Therefore, maybe
if a plain woman in the street says, I don't want Yosy Simon to have an offer my payers, it's kodesh. And then 6 months later, you want to be magdisha. Does that mean because she has payers that are also to you that you can't be magdisha?
Makadisher, you mean?
Makadisha, yeah.
No, of course I could be Makadisher. Those payers remain usher to me, but I could be Makadisher.
So what's the whole problem over here?
Oh, you're saying Gavaltic. You brought up a very important point. What in the world of answering someone's payers have to do with Dover Shaloi B'Loy? One has nothing to do with the next. And that's true. One has nothing to do with the next. All we're trying to say here is you see that kainamos don't work like regular hektish. They're a little bit of a chiddush. You could do things with kainamos that you couldn't do with hektish. So then let's suspend the rule of Dover Shaloi B'Loy. Just like kainamos don't play by the normal rules of hektish, and you could make somebody else's Paris us with you, I can't make your Paris hektish, but I could put an Isser on your Paris related to me. So too, even though you could not be makdish a davar shaloi b'loilam, let's say that you could make a koinim on a davar shaloi b'loilam. So zok the Gemara shekein adam oiser peroisav al chaveroi. Therefore, yes, there davar shaloi b'loilam al chaveroi. Why? Shekein ein adam oiser peris chaveroi al chaveroi. I wouldn't be able to. I'm sorry. Amalei Abaye. I skipped too many lines. So let me go back. Amar B'Yosef Kainamis Gomer Shiny Kainamis Mitoy Shadamois or Paris Chaver Elov Adin Makdish Dover Shaloi Balad. So that was the argument. Frag the Gemara, just because you find one anomaly by Kaidavos, so then you're going to make up wild rules that you can be Makdish Dover Shaloi Balad. There's a very big difference between the anomaly of being able to answer your Chaver's Paris on yourself to Makish Davar Shaloi B'Loilam. And it's too big of a jump to assume one would apply just because the other applied. Amr Le Abaye, and these are the details. Bishlama, I can understand Adam Oisher Paris Havere alone. You know why? I understand I can answer your Paris on me. You know why? Shekain Adam Oisher Paris of Al Havere. You could answer your Paris on somebody else. And Tosfos explains that there's 2 points that we need to deal with when you're creating an Isser, either for your Paris to your friend or for your friend's Paris to you. So let's say we're talking about me answering my friend's Paris on me. I have no shlita, no control over my friend's Paris, but I have control over myself. So out of the 2 issues, I have one strike against me. The strike against me is that I don't have control over my friend's Paris, but I do have control over myself. Let's look at the flip side. If I'm saying that my Paris should be also to my friend, once again, there's out of 2 strikes, there's only 1 against me because I have no control over my friend, but I do have control over my Paris. So Zokte Baye, that's a logical conclusion to make. The same way, Yosy said, that's a logical conclusion to make. The same way, I'm sorry, to Abaye, that's a logical conclusion to make. The same way, I can answer my friend's Paris on me, where there's 1 point in favor and 1 not, so too, Adam Oisher Paris al Chaveroi, because there's 1 point in my favor and 1 not. But you want to go and say that we can even make a koinim when there's 2 things working against me. Yeter davar kaloi bola olam al Chaveroi. You're going to say that when there's 2 things running against me, side that it's on my chaver, and side that it's something that's not even in existence. So there's 2 strikes against me. There you want to say that I should be able to do it? When there's 2 strikes against you, you cannot do it. I can't go over to you and tell you that your Paris are also to you, because there's 2 strikes against me. Say it's not me, and say it's not my Paris. So too, when it's a davar shaloi b'lo'olam, there's also 2 strikes against you. So how can you argue that there's a difference between hektish and kainamas? And even though Shmuel Paskins ain't adam makdish davar shaloi b'lo'olam, he will allow kainamas and the davar shaloi b'lo'olam. That's completely illogical, because whatever chiddush you find by kainamas, which when there's 1 strike against me, it still works. That would no way justify being able to be even make a kainim on a davar shaloi b'lo'olam. So now we're stuck again. We have a steer in Shmuel. Ella Amar Rab Huna Baredi Rab Yeshua. Rab Huna Baredi Rab Yeshua wants to once again justify why it should be different over here. Why her koinim, even though it's only about wages in the future, why it should be valid. It's Ba'imeres Yikachu Yodai Loisayim. She is not answering a davar shaloi b'lo'olam, her future malacha. She's answering her hand, which are right now here. So that's no longer a davar shaloi b'lo'olam. The yodayim isnu b'olam. So we've avoided the whole problem of davar shaloi b'lo'olam because her hands are here. Dr. Gemara, you've only solved 1 of the 2 problems, but we still have a major problem. Because v'chika amar hachi mi mekacha, if she says that my hands should be kodesh for their malacha, Are you telling me that she can do that? Hamishabdele. She doesn't have any ownership currently over the maisim of her hands, so she can't be makdish her hands and then in fact her maisi yadayim, because her maisi yadayim she doesn't own. It's like if you own a dekel, but you've sold the payros, you can't now be makdish the payros because they're not yours. So how could Shmuel once again justify her being makdish or making a koinim on her future earnings if they're not hers right now? Zok to Gemara, the Amra, maybe it's because she says lechi migrisha. She's not making her current Maisi Adayim also to him. In fact, those are not hers, they're Meshubah to him. But she's referring to the Maisi Adayim. In my hands now exists the potential to do malacha long term, and that portion, the potential in my hands that are going to do malacha after I get divorced, it's that part of my hands that I want to be makdil. So if you could do that, now that explains why Shmuel over here Paskins like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. But Dr. Noir, that's not a good argument. Because umi kamidi, the ilu hashtaloi kaddish, ulekamei kaddish, there's no such thing that if you wanted to make something hektish now, it wouldn't work, but it will work in the future. So since she cannot be makdish her hands now for their ma'isi yadayim, she can't be makdish her hands now for future ma'isi yadayim. So once again, we don't have an explanation as to why Shmuel would look at this case differently. Amar Abaloi, Alam Aloi. Who said not? Maybe in fact you could be makdish something for the future, even though you can't do it now. And I'll give you an example of where that works. Ilu ha'omer l'chaveira. Someone tells his friend, Sadazu tani moichala. I have a field that I'm right now prepared to sell to you. But what I want to declare is, I'm going to sell it to you now. Right now it's mine, but I'm going to sell it to you. When I buy it back from you, tikadosh, it should become hektish. Milai kacha, wouldn't that be hektish? So you see that even though I can't be makdish it now, I could be makdish it for the future. So too, maybe that's why Shmuel Paskins, like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri here, that she could be makdish her ma'aser yadayim of the future. But that's not a good argument. That's not a sound argument. There's no comparison between a woman today being makdish her future ma'aser yadayim and someone who owns a field right now who's saying he'll be makdish it when he buys it back. Because in the case of the field, right now, I have not sold it yet. So when I'm making my declaration that it's going to be kodesh when I buy it back, I could technically be makdish right now. Because at this point, I haven't sold it yet. But haka ain't biyoda l'garish atma. This woman right now, she can't divorce herself. She's dependent on her husband. So therefore, since now she couldn't free her ma'aser yadayim, and she couldn't be makdish her ma'aser yadayim, how do you expect her to be able to be makdish yadayim in the future? So on this point in the Gemara, there's an obvious question, because we're talking about a woman's ability to free her ma'aser yadayim. Sure, if her husband's divorced her, that frees up her ma'aser yadayim and she gets them back. But we learned not too long ago another way for a woman, even while she remains married, to be able to free up and reclaim her ma'aser yadayim. And when was that? We learned that if a woman tells her husband, "Eini zon ve'eini oisa," I don't need you to support me, but I don't want you to have a ma'aser yadayim. She has the right to say that and reclaim her ma'aser yadayim. So in fact, she would be able to do that over here. So Tosfos answers there was a machlokes if she can do that or not. And the Gemara here wants to answer, even according to the Tzad, that she cannot do that. How do we justify Shmuel saying that she could be makdish her ma'aser yadayim? If someone tells his friend, this field that I have already sold to you, which is no longer mine, when I buy it back from you, tikadosh, it should become kodesh. And there, in this case, the halacha is surely the light touch. It's not kodesh because right now it doesn't belong to me. So too, this woman who wants to be makdish her future ma'aser yadayim, which currently do not belong to her, it shouldn't work. So if that's the case, how does Shmuel Paskin like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that it in fact does work. Matkav Papa. Maybe we have another twist. Midami. Hatam Gufa Uperes Biyada Delakea. When I have already sold my field, at this point, the goof of the field belongs to the purchaser, and the payers belong to the purchaser. I have totally sold the field. But hacha, when it comes to a woman's ma'is yadayim, gufa b'yadahu, he doesn't own her hands. He has a right to her ma'is yadayim, but her hands belong to her. So maybe since her hands do belong to her, she does have a right to be makdish them. Halodamya, you know what we should compare this case to? Someone who tells his friend, and we'll turn on to Nuntes Amid Beis. Sodazu Shemishkantila, this field that I gave you as a mashkin, which means the field still belongs to me. You have a lien on the field. You can take its payers. This field, when I come up with the money and I buy it back and I redeem it, Tikadesh, it should become hektish. There, the kosher that becomes kodesh because I own the field now. You just have a sheep, but you have a lien on it. But I own the field. That will work. Therefore, so to a woman, she owns her hand. Her ma'is yadayim are surely meshubed to her husband. But since she owns her hand, it should be no different than this field that she owns. But it's meshubed to somebody else. That she should be able to make it hektish. So once again, we have an explanation why Shmuel agrees with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri that when she was makdish, her future ma'is yadayim, they still become kodesh. But the Gemara has another twist that still doesn't work. Midami. How can you compare the two? How could you compare the two? Hasam b'yadai leftaisa, with the field that had a lien on it. At any moment that I want, I can bring the money, I could pay off the loan, and the lien dissolves. So it's very much in my control to reclaim the field. That's why I could make it kodesh. But haka ein biyada lagarish atzma. She can't control if her husband's going to give her a divorce and if she'll be able to reclaim her ma'is yadayim. So she shouldn't be able to be makdish them. So haladamya, you know what it's comparable to? Someone who tells us cover, this field that is collateral to you, and I can't redeem it for 10 years, I cannot redeem it. But when I redeem it after the 10 years, tikadesh, there the kosher, there it becomes kodesh. So to her, if it's sometime in the future, even though she can't do it right now, but she could do it sometime in the future, that should still allow her to be able to make it kodesh. Zok Gemara, that doesn't either work. So what the haladamya elo lo'imel chaver sadu mishkanti loch lezer shanim lichashav denim achati kodesh. The kosher there becomes kodesh. Zok Gemara, no, that wouldn't work because maskav l'rabashi midami. Once again, you can't compare that case to this case because hatam lezer shanim mia biyade leftoisa. In the case of the lien for 10 years, after 10 years, it's in my control to redeem it. So that's called a field that's still somewhat in my control that I could be makdish. But a woman, it's not like in 10 years she has the right to demand a divorce. She could never demand a divorce. So she doesn't have good enough of a grasp or good enough of control on their own ma'is yadayim. And therefore, you cannot justify, if you hold ein adam makdish dover shaloi bala olam, you cannot justify her being able to be makdish her future ma'is yadayim. Ella Amar Ravashi, the only way we can explain why Shmuel holds that kainamais, this case of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, is different than when he was makdish or ma'is yadayim, is because kainamais ka'amrit. You're talking about kainamais here, shiny kainamais, the kedushas haguf ninu. Kainamais have a din of kedushas haguf, just like you're making a carbon. When you make a carbon that has a kedushas haguf, that what kainamais has that same halachic effect. And what's the significance of that effect? Like the famous Kiddush of Rava, Rava hektish, chometz v'shichur mafkiyin midei shibud. Kainamais, just like Kedushas Aguf, like making something into a carbon, has the ability to break a shibud. So even though her ma'aseh yadayim are meshubah to her husband, through the mechanism of a koinem, she can actually break that shibud. And that's why her being makashit in the future, after she's divorced, will work. Now, exactly the details of how hektish, chometz, and shikr are mafkim de shibud, we're going to get to in a minute, but I don't want to lose the flow of the Gemara. So we're at the point that we're saying, since she's making a koinem on her future earnings, since koinem can break a shibud, it will be chal, even though now they're not hers, they're his. Break the Gemara. If you're working with that mechanism, that koinomis will break the shibud, well, v'niktishu mehashta. When she says right now, my ma'aseh should be offered to you, well, they should be usher immediately. They're not hers, they're meshubah him. We just said a moment ago that a koinem can break a shibud. So let it be kodesh now. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri only said that her future ma'aseh after her divorce will become kodesh. But if you're using this mechanism that a kohen breaks a shibud, then in fact it should be kodesh right now. Dr. Gemara, a beautiful finish. Almua rabbanon l'shibude de baal yehechid letikdish mahasha. Could you imagine if she could make a kohen and answer her husband's ma'aseh yadayim? So basically, the whole takana that he gets from ma'aseh yadayim dissolved because she can easily eliminate it by making a kohen. So they made us really the structure of a koinem, the mechanism of a koinem, wiped out his shibud. But they're abundant to step in and intervene using their koyach of hefker bes nefker, I assume, and say that even though technically you can eliminate and dissolve his shibud with your koinem, we're not going to let that happen. We're going to keep his koinem in force. And therefore, her isser won't be chal until after the Rabbanon safeguards it. Which means after he divorces her, they've taken off that safeguard, and now the isser that she placed earlier will be chal. And therefore, Shmuel is not a stira, because Shmuel said, Eino l'makdish davar shaloi b'loila. True. But by a koinem, it's not a davar shaloi b'loila, because she's not answering future earnings. She's answering her earnings immediately. But there are Rabbanan made at the kana that he gets to keep those earnings anyway. But in fact, there's an isser immediately, it's not a davar shaloi b'loila. So as long as the Rabbanan are running interference while she's married to him, he still is entitled to her ma'aseh yadayim. But the moment that he divorces her, that isser comes into effect because really it was chal already originally because a koinem will blow up a shibud. So Tosfos asks the obvious question: if a koinem blows up a shibud, anytime I borrow money from anybody, I can borrow $1 million from anybody I want, and then I can make a koinem on him to have enough of my nechassim, and now I don't have to pay him back. Yes. So Tosfos says, let's look at the first wide line in Tosfos. Very simple Tosfos. Kol namos karmit, im timer fek Tosfos, im kein kol adam, yafkia kol mamoinoi, mibal choyboy ayidei koin. If a person could make a koinem to break a shibud, so I borrowed $1 million, I have a shibud to pay back, I'll make a koinem and I'm done. V'yesh loimers of Tosfos, the lav dafka shibud the baal amur rabbanon, lachanami the amur l'shibud the baal chayiv. The rabbanon didn't only say that she can't blow up his shibud with the koinem, it applies to a baal chayiv as well. They want to protect transaction. Otherwise, people would never lend money. So, of course, even though technically through a koinem he can be mevatel the chayiv, nevertheless, the rabbanon said that the chayiv still stays in effect. So when Aaron Grubner heard this, he said, it's interesting. Tosfos says that how are they mevatel chayiv with the koinem, but the koinem doesn't work. Aaron told me I have plenty of clients that without a koinem, the people never paid back. So even without a koinem, some people don't pay back their debts. So now let's analyze in greater detail, what does this mean? What does this mean? Hektish, chometz, and shikr blow up, break a shibud. So Rashi is very thorough with this. So let's look at Rashi. Hektish, which is about 5 lines down in the skinny lines. Hektish, what's the example? We're going sheshibet sharei l'bachay. Reuben owed Shimon $1,000. Reuben said, I have an ox that's worth $1,000. I'm going to put a lien on my ox, and if I can't pay you, you can collect my ox. And then what did he do? Because of Viktisha. Then he went to this ox, and he said, I raise a oila. And he was makdashit as a korban. So the halacha is mafkia shibud hamalva. The malva can no longer claim this ox. This ox now is a korban. So what does the malva do? The goy v'chayv mimokamacher. the Malva will have to find some other asset to collect from. Vizek kosher l'korban. And this animal that he was makish is a kosher korban. You don't look at it like he stole it from the Malva. The Einoi Gadol, it's not considered stolen. The Loyavakani Le Elalu Guvaina Ba'alma. Because the Malva never owned this ox, he had a lien on it. That lien gets eliminated, and this is a kosher korban. Rashi says this only applies to Kedushas Aguf. If someone made Bedek Abayis, that wouldn't break the Shibud. But Kedushas Aguf, like a korban, breaks the Shibud. Now let's look at Chometz. Chometz, so Rashi, also Chemtoy Apoiteki Levit Gechapim. I borrowed $1,000 from a guy, and I told the guy, I have here $1,000 worth of good mashka, and if I don't pay back, you can collect this mashka. V'gia Pesach, and Pesach arrived, and now all of my mashka becomes Osir Bano. Iser Chometz Mafkiyoi Mishibud Oibet Dechavim. The guy can no longer collect from this whiskey, the Neser Bano, and it becomes Osir Bano. So you see that Iser of Chometz breaks the shibud that the guy has on this whiskey. And the last case was shikr. Also, abdei apoitiki. What if I have a servant and I owe someone $1,000? And I told my creditor, if I can't pay, you can collect my servant. And then the loiva went and freed his evet. So the loch is mishukra. The shikr works, and the person who had a lien on the evet loses. And if the Malva wants to collect, we'll have to find some other assets to collect from. So you see, in all three cases, even though there was a lien, there was a shibud, by being makdishit or by becoming chometz that's usher, or being mishaker, it breaks the shibud. Huadin, a lien for a person who owns the ma'atzidayim of his wife, it breaks that shibud. But there's a special takana that says that he's entitled to her ma'atzidayim while he's married to her. That takes us to the Mishnah. Now we're gone with the complicated Gemara. Now we're going to learn a new Gemara. It's a very Geshmak Gemara, but I need to warn you that you should lower the volume if you're listening loud, because you don't want your wife to hear what we're about to learn. Zok the Heilige Mishnah. Ve'elu malachos she'isha oisa l'bayla. These are the following malachos that a woman must do for her husband. Toichenes, she must grind and mill her grain. V'oife, she must bake. Umechabeses, and she must wash the laundry. Mivasheles, she must cook. Umanikas b'no, she must nurse her son. Matzas loyamita, she must make his bed. And there's Rishonim who learn she has to make all of the beds in the house. V'oitze b'tzemer, she has to work with wool. I'm not sure precisely what work she has to do with the wool. However, let's say when she came into the marriage, she came with a billah, she came with a zilpah, or she came with money that could have purchased a billah or a zilpah. Well, then one shivcha is loy toichenes, v'loy oife, v'loy mechabeses. She's free of those three jobs. Shtayim, what if she brings two goites into the marriage? Then she's free from some more jobs. Ein mivasheles, ve'ein manikes b'no. Shalosh, if she brought three goites, ein matzas loyamita, ve'ein oisa b'tzemer. Arba, if she brings in four goites, yoshin b'katadra, she can sit in the salon and get a manicure, a pedicure, a massage, and a facial, and she doesn't have to do any work at all. So this is very dangerous because your wife's going to say, you see, I do the work of four people. You see how hard I work? I do the work of four guys you'd need to replace me. So you have to be careful with this. This could be a double-edged sword, this Mishnah. Okay. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. Zok the Heilige Mishnah weiter. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Even if she brought in 100 servants, you could still force your wife to do a job. You know why? Because someone who doesn't have a job and sitting around doing nothing, boredom, sitting around with nothing is going to lead to znus. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, what if a man asks his wife from doing any malacha for her? That's damaging to her because he's forcing her to sit around and do nothing. Yosy v'yitin ksuba, she has the right to demand a get, and he has to give the ksuba because she can say it's damaging to me not to do anything at all. It makes you go cuckoo if you don't do any work. So it's interesting. There's she'imam makes you go cuckoo, and there's zima. So the Noise Kalim on the Shulchan Aruch speak out that what if she doesn't have any jobs, but you can give her something to entertain yourself with? And the example that the Noise Kalim of the Shulchan Aruch give is if you buy her a dog. What if you buy your wife a little dog to entertain yourself with? So I assume a dog is no different than a smartphone or some other device that she could entertain herself with. That works very good, that there should be no she'imum. But it does not stop zima. If someone is just entertained, but not responsible with a job, with a responsibility, that will still bring lidei zima. So therefore, giving your wife a dog will not solve the problem. That's what, or I assume any type of entertainment would not solve the problem. A woman has to have responsibility. That's what the Mishnah says. Kol shekain men. That's just my addition. Okay. Zok the heilige Gemara. Toichenes, polkadaita. She doesn't do the grinding. It goes into a windmill or a water mill or an animal that drives the millstone. She's not grinding it herself. It doesn't mean she actually does the grinding herself, but she has to prepare the container with the grain, and she has to bring it to the mill, and then she has to catch the flour. So it means doing the arranging and coordinating, not necessarily the actual job. No, maybe it means that you can actually force your wife to use a hand-driven mill, and she has to get a workout on her biceps and on her triceps. Zog the Gemara must sneeze in the loiker Rabchia. Our Mishnah is inconsistent with Rabchia. The Tani Rabchia said you don't have to let your wife work at all. Ein isha ela liyofi. The purpose of a woman is for her beauty only. Ein isha ela labana. A woman is to make children. V'tani Rabchia ein isha ela tachchita isha. What the purpose of a woman? So you could shower her with beautiful gifts. Sheyiknu lo tachchitin lisnois, Ben Rashi said. You should shower her with gifts. Before I can say that since a woman's only levanim, and sometimes when a woman has bonim, it impacts her beauty, so therefore you have to pile on the tachshitim so that she could look and feel beautiful. And the poskim say that not only does a woman make herself beautiful in your house, but even when she walks out on the street in public, she should make herself beautiful so that when you're walking with her, you shouldn't look at others, you should look at your own wife. As a matter of fact, it's brought down from the poskim, why is it that we lane on Yom Kippur by Mincha the Parish of Arayas? So the Mefarshim tell us the reason why we lane the Parish of Arayas is because that's when women come to shul, all dressed up nicely, and we're afraid someone could be nifshal. So that then and there on Yom Kippur, we have to read the Parish of Arayas to tell people to be careful. Rav Moshe also says, someone asked Rav Moshe Shaila if a woman's allowed to get a nose job. She's putting herself under the knife. And if Moshe's avada, she's allowed to get a nose job because a woman has to be beautiful, and therefore, if she wants a nose job, avada, she's allowed to. V'tani Reb Chia learned her right is if someone wants his wife to glow, yalbishana klepishta, and he should buy her beautiful linen clothing. Her right is sheyalbenes bitai. If he wants his daughter to have fair skin, yachilena afroichim, he should give her to eat young birds. V'yashkena chalov, and she should drink milk. Samach lepirka, as she's maturing, because that will make her have nice, fair, white skin. Just to finish off, the Avudraham says, we see a woman has so many responsibilities to take care of her husband. We want her to be available to take care of her husband. Zokta Avudraham, that's one of the reasons why a woman is potter from a mitzvah saseh chazman groma. Because what if she has a deadline to do a mitzvah, and at that moment her husband needs her to do something? The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't want to stand in the way of shalom bayis. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't want to stand in the way of a woman serving her husband. So therefore, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, a mitzvah saseh chazman groma, don't worry about. Because if your husband needs you, then you do what your husband needs you to do. If it's a mitzvah saseh shaloh chazman groma, well, then you don't have to do it at any specific time. You'll do it when your husband doesn't need you. So that's what the Avudraham said. So we'll stop here, and I want to wish everybody a good tavach, a gebench tavach, a mazel tavach, a simcha tavach.
Amen.
Oh, yeah.
A pain-free Vach.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, good to Vach, everybody.
Tomorrow, 9 o'clock.
Yes, tomorrow 9 o'clock, and as well as Monday 9 o'clock. Monday we're learning at 7 as well. Normally we're at 6, but since it's Labor Day, Monday we're learning at 7. Eddie, very very nice to see you, and Ephraim, was nice to see your name.
Thank you.
Good to Vach.
Good work.
You too.